What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back. I'm doing a new series with the homie Mike Sears. Uh, we're going to be reviewing all of Bruce Lee's martial arts films. We're starting with The Big Boss, and then we'll end with Game of Death. I'm going to try and get these like out every week. Every week we'll come out with a new episode. Um, I guess to start, I'll talk about like how I found Bruce Lee. I don't think I've ever told this story. I know I've told this to like people, but I don't think I've ever like talked about it on like recording, so to speak. It was fifth grade. There was this kid. I think his name was like Eric Mezes or some. I can't remember exactly what his name is. It was so long ago, but he was talking to me. I don't know why this subject came up, but he was talking about how Bruce Lee died. That he said somebody just touched him, and he did like this little motion, just like this. He's like touched him, and he died. And I was just like, when you hear something like that, you're like immediately like bullshit meter goes off. And I was like,
Yeah.
no, he fucking did. I didn't know, but I was like,
What
no,
he
he
give him the Vulcan pinch?
yeah, that's something like he was insinuating it was like the touch of death, the martial
Yeah.
arts touch of death. And I just knew it was bullshit, but I didn't know, you know what I mean? I didn't know how he actually died. So that led me down like the rabbit hole, basically, was just that calling his bullshit and trying to find
Yeah.
out exactly what happened. And I think the first movie I saw was probably Enter the Dragon. It was either Enter the Dragon or Fist of Fury. And I remember I talked about this in another show that we recorded that might come out called
Oh,
Dragon, a Bruce Lee story that I saw too when I was younger. And I remember I went to the library and I read, he came out with that book, The Tao of Jeet Kune Do. And I remember reading that book. And so, and then this led me down the whole, Shaw Brothers martial arts films. I mean, Bruce Lee is, one of the most uh, impactful people in my life, really. There's
yeah.
only a couple people that are up there, you know what I mean? And him and like George Romero are, two of them. But yeah, so Mike, what was your like introduction to Bruce Lee?
Bruce Lee is one of the most important figures in my life as well. Like he's always been there. As a young child, just that image of him. And my uncle Billy is actually a martial artist, so he put my uncle Martin onto Bruce. And my first movie that my uncle showed me was Fist of Fury. Fucking to this day, my favorite Bruce film. And second was Game of Death, which I didn't like.
Yeah.
But I did like the iconic yellow and black
Oh
jumpsuit
yeah.
and the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar fight. That's just ingrained in my head. But when I seen Enter the Dragon, it was a fucking wrap. You know what I'm saying? Like, mind blown. And then I went back, seen the Big Boss and shit like that. Just the iconic figure. Of course, the Bruce Lee story, the Dragon, the Bruce Lee story. Um, as a kid, I did like it. But when I grew up and learned more about Bruce, like way too far fetched shit in there, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's definitely like exaggerated. Like they play up like this, at the end, when he dies, they kind of play up like the Bruce Lee curse thing. Like,
Yeah, Brandon, his son, and all that shit.
yeah, they
Yeah,
play up the Bruce Lee curse and all that. But I mean, I like the movie at the time. But yeah, like you said, there's a lot of
yeah,
like they move around a lot of situations and they change a lot of the things that happened and the way they happened. But I mean, one of those things that happened in that movie that I don't think a lot of people know is that Bruce is actually American. Like he was born in San Francisco. And then because him and his parents were there for, I forget exactly what it was. I think he was like, I don't know. I know his parents were into like acting as well.
yeah,
So yeah, he was born in San Francisco. Then they went back to Hong Kong, and Bruce, he was in like 20 films before he even like started doing martial arts because he was like a child actor.
yeah.
I've never seen any of those
I
movies.
seen clips of it. I was like,
Oh
oh
yeah,
shit.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I've seen clips of them in like documentaries and stuff. But what caused him to come to America was he's getting fights all the time. He would just like go out with his friends and just like get in fights and get in trouble and shit. And so his parents were like, "Yo, you can't be doing this. We're gonna send you to America." So they sent him to America. He came to, I believe it was Seattle, and that was where he met his wife Linda. And he started teaching martial arts there. And what happened is he went to like a seminar type thing, like a karate tournament. And in between that, they were giving seminars and like talking about martial arts. And so he gave his, and it was about Jeet Kune Do before I think he even knew what it was called. but he was just basically saying like these traditional styles are like they're stuck in their old ways. They're too rigid. Like you have to take the best of all of them. And then that caught the eye of like Hollywood. And Bruce hadn't planned on doing any movies, even though he'd acted before. He was kind of like done with that. But they were like, he was convinced to like go in and do something. And so he got his connection to Hollywood there, and he got the role to play as Kato in the Green Hornet.
Well,
And like, I guess he didn't like being the sidekick, and they never really gave him any speaking lines. And so, and he was trying to get in other movies, but Hollywood was like, it's like it is now. They don't want an
yeah,
unproven star, and back then it was even worse because they didn't think a Chinese guy could be a star, have a
yeah,
leading role in a movie. So he just got really pissed off with Hollywood, and he was like, "Fuck it, I'm gonna go back to Hong Kong." And he went back to Hong Kong. This is kind of like what happened with Jackie Chan.
yeah,
Like Jackie Chan tried to get big in America, it didn't work. Went back to Hong Kong, and then that's where he got notoriety in America. So that's what happened. He went to Hong Kong, and when he got back to Hong Kong, people went crazy because Green Hornet had been like syndicated out in China, so he was like the hometown hero, and everybody was like, "Oh, it's Kato, it's Kato." Everybody was really happy, and so this guy Lo Wei, who's the one who directed this movie we're about to review, The Big Boss. His son, I believe, had seen him in Green Hornet, and he said, "Hey, this guy's pretty good. Like, we should get him." So Loewe took the idea to Raymond Chow, who ran Golden Harvest, who had branched off from the Shaw Brothers. And the Shaw Brothers didn't like Raymond Chow. And so his studio was doing really terrible at the time because they wouldn't let him play in theaters. They were like, blocking him, like blacklisting him basically. And so he's like, shit, he like needs something that's going to pop off. So he gets Bruce and makes this new movie we're about to talk about, The Big Boss. Yeah, directed by Lo Wei, starring Bruce Lee, obviously, Maria Yi, James Tien, who has an interesting story in this. And there's a lot of the actors that you'll see in this movie. Like you'll notice them if you've seen the other Bruce Lee movies. They're like standard characters that he has. Like
yeah. Like the Big Boss's cocky ass son, the pink shirt. He's like an Enter the Dragon, I think. Like Bruce takes his people with him. That's a good dude
yeah,
right there.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like the chick that's in this movie, she's in a couple of his movies, and she didn't do
Yeah.
much. She only did like 8 movies, and they like half of them were Bruce Lee movies. Yeah, so the basic plot of the movie is Bruce lives they don't really show this part, but he is in China, I believe, and he makes a promise with his mother that he's not going to fight, and she gives him like this jade necklace that reminds him like, hey, don't get in trouble when you go there. So he goes to Thailand to be with his brothers, and it was a weird thing with the translation. They weren't literal brothers, they were like brothers. These are my brothers.
Yeah.
And so he goes there and he's living with them, and he's going to get this job at this ice factory in Thailand. And the factory is a front for dope front.
Yeah, straight up.
And they stick the dope in the ice. So one of the funniest parts in the movie is like very early on. Bruce gets off the boat, fresh off the boat, and he gets with the guy who's like his handler or whatever. He leaves right away. And they go and they sit at this little
His uncle, I believe.
this little like shaved ice thing or something like
Yeah.
that, where one of the romantic other girl that he likes is there
Yeah.
like working it. And this little kid who comes up with these dumplings, and then this gang comes up and they start taking all the stuff and shit. And Bruce wants to get up, but his uncle reminds him like, hey, no, you can't fight. Remember, you
Yeah.
promised. You're like, oh, okay. And then they just start taking the dumplings from this little kid, And the little kid's like, "Hey, money!" And he holds his hand up like this, and and the boss guy just spits in his hand.
There, he's like, there.
It just kicks him away. It's so fucking funny. And then the James Yen character comes in
Yeah.
and kind of like saves the day. And what's funny about this movie, and I found out actually just like getting ready to do this review, is that they didn't know who the lead was going to be. It was going to be either Bruce Lee or James Yen.
Yeah,
And
I read
like
about that.
they decided while they were filming the movie who would be the star. And then one of the two was going to get basically killed off. And so obviously they went with Bruce Lee because he was like, popping on screen, which
Yeah.
as you're watching the movie, it's like, it's pretty obvious, especially when you know that and you're watching it, you can see like in the beginning, it looks like Bruce Lee's like the sidekick. Like,
Yeah.
it's really interesting how they did that in the middle of the film. I could never imagine them doing something like that.
Because he couldn't fight.
Yeah.
Once in a while, when he
But
does, it's a dope moment.
yeah. So he goes to this, they have like this house where like they all live together, basically, when they all work at this ice factory. And he's working at the ice factory, and like all the foremans are like jackasses, obviously. I mean,
Oh
they're all
yeah.
like drug lords basically that work there, and they're like beating the shit out of their employees and stuff. These are the dumbest criminals, like stuff that happens later on. These are like the stupidest criminals,
Yeah.
like just the way that they talk to people and shit. They're so dumb. It's like no surprise that they end up getting their shit in the end.
The manager's
Um,
stupid as fuck too.
yeah. But what happens is basically Bruce Lee starts working, and he pushes this ice block down this like chute, and it falls off and it breaks, and then the dope flies out, and there's two guys that see that this happened.
They actually pick it up and look at it.
Yeah, they pick it up and look at it, and then at the end of their work day, the foreman's like, "Hey, the big boss wants to see you," and so they bring him in, and the boss guy's like, "Hey, I got $2,000 for you guys." They like try to bribe him off, but they both like decline. And they seem totally harmless, like they weren't even going to
Yeah.
tell anybody. But this is where like it gets this, and then like this scene's like brutal as fuck because
Yeah.
like so far it's kind of like funny. This movie's really weird. We talked about this a little bit. It's like
Yeah.
there's like really funny moments, and like Bruce Lee's always really like whimsical. Like his acting is like he's got this like comedic like way about him.
Yeah.
It's subtle, but it's there. Like just little things that he does, like in the like early in the movie when that girl's like looking at him, and he like looks over and catches, and he like looks away, and it's like,
Yeah.
there's just little things that he does that are really funny. But anyway, they get out from talking to the boss, and they fucking stab the one dude, and then the other dude takes a hatchet to his
The
fucking
fucking
head,
head.
just
Yeah.
takes the hatchet to his dome. I'm like, oh shit. And then they take him over to where they cut the ice, and they literally put him on like this cutter thing and like cut him in half.
Yep. Stick them niggas in the ice.
Yeah, it's brutal as hell. You're like, what the fuck? Like, I guess that was also one of the scenes that they cut later on because China started like editing stuff like that with martial arts films because they were getting too violent.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's like it's such a because there's so many like comedic moments in the movie, but then there's like this backdrop. I think it's definitely like the most violent Bruce Lee movie. Like most of the other movies, he just beats people up. In this movie, he's killing people. Like he's got knives and he's stabbing people, and like
Yep.
it's crazy as fuck.
It's fucking fantastic film. It's like, and it's so naive. Like, oh, they'll be back. Our brothers will be back. No,
Yeah, that's
they're
what I'm
dead.
saying. Why the criminals are so stupid is like people start coming up missing.
Yeah,
And
straight
like
up.
everybody's like, hey, what happened to this guy? And like, oh no, he probably found a girl, he got some money, he probably
got
quit his
drunk.
job. Yeah, he got drunk. He's not,
Yeah.
and everybody's like, oh, okay.
And then the other guy, this guy right here, he's like, they're probably dead, aren't they? Like he ain't taking that shit. Like he wants to find them. He's determined.
Yeah, like we said, like James Tien kind of plays kind of like a main character in this.
Yeah, James
In the
Tien.
beginning, he's the one who's like leading the charge. He's like, what the fuck? Where are these guys? Let me talk to the foreman. Let me talk to the boss. So he eventually goes to like this big boss's like main like layer, like headquarters. And they go in there, and things go south basically, and
Yeah,
he's like, you know
straight
what,
up.
fuck you. I know you did something. I'm gonna get the cops. I'm gonna get you. It's like,
Yeah,
why are you saying this to his face?
because he gonna body your ass and you try to walk away.
Yeah, so he walks away, and as he gets outside, all these guys, all these gangsters walk up, and they've got like billy clubs and chains and
Yeah,
knives and all kinds of shit. And then they get into this big drag out fight. And what's crazy is like during the fight, like he gets cut in the back and he's got like skin flapping around in the back. I don't know if you saw it.
yeah.
He's got like the skin flap and he's like fucking fighting and he's got the skin flapping around in the back.
I think the
And
son finishes him off, doesn't he? Just throws a knife in his chest.
just throws the knife just like right in his
Yeah,
stomach. So then they're like, okay, where the fuck is this guy at now?
then you listen to
So
shit.
Bruce is like, all right, we're gonna find out. And so Bruce and a big gang of the workers go there, and then a big fight breaks out. And there's all these moments where Bruce is like so tempted to fight, like people punch him or something like that, and he's just
Yeah.
like, and then he feels the necklace, and he's like, okay, I can't fight. It's so funny. And then during this fight, somebody runs into him, and the necklace breaks and falls off, and it was like,
He goes,
it was like instantaneous. It was like all of a sudden it was like, okay, now I can beat some ass. Like,
yeah, roundhouse kicks.
yeah, roundhouse
Amazing.
kicks. He's like knocking knives out of people's hands and shit. Like he's
Yeah.
fucking going crazy, going ham on these motherfuckers. So Bruce basically ends it really quick. And then he goes into the office and they make him the head foreman. The other guy's out. So everybody's like, yeah. So they go celebrate. They're like doing the conga line as they go home and shit.
Sipping
And then,
on Hennessy.
yeah,
You see the
they're like,
Hennessy bottle right there.
they're like sipping on some juice and shit. And then all of a sudden they're like, hey, whatever happened to what happened to him? They're like, oh shit, we forgot. So then there's like this turmoil because Bruce gets invited to see the boss, and then he's like
Yeah.
drinking and he sleeps with a hooker and shit. Like,
You know, titties exposed and all that.
yeah,
shit.
yeah. There's everything in this fucking movie, legit. And so he gets back home. Then he's like, once again, he's like, oh shit, I forgot again.
One of his cousins gets mad. He's like, "Yeah, you sold out for dinner."
Yeah, you sold out. So then Bruce goes out. I can't remember exactly what he does, but he's going out. I think he's going to like, he goes back to the factory to see what he can find.
Yeah. Oof.
And he like picks through the ice because the hooker tells him what they're doing. The hooker tells him like, hey, this is up front. They're selling dope. And he's like, oh shit. So he goes to the factory at night and he like picks at the ice and he finds the dope. And as this is happening, the gangsters are going to the house that he stays at where all his friends are. And the gangsters kill his whole fight, like everybody, even the little kid, like everybody fucking dies except for the girl. They take the girl to the boss because the boss is going to have his way with her. And then, meanwhile, Bruce is at the factory and he finds the dude's body frozen in the ice. And he's like, oh shit. And then he gets up and he's like, oh, and he turns around. The lights come on. The lights come on. There's like 20 gangsters. He's like, oh shit. So he beats the shit out of people. And he eventually has to like figure out a way to get back to the boss's place.
That's an epic showdown.
Yeah.
Dope fight,
The showdown is similar to like the Enter the Dragon Han fight.
Yeah, Han with the fucking claw.
Yeah, but there's this funny moment before he gets into the main fight with the big boss where these like German shepherds are sitting there and he's like jumping over the German shepherds.
Jump scene, yeah.
But yeah, the final fight is really dope. It's funny because they had a different ending where the fight or it ends where Bruce is on top of him like punching him.
Yeah.
And then it ended because in the like I guess original or like the official version, whatever, the cops come and they take Bruce away. But like Bruce basically kills the dude. Like it's crazy. What is he? I forget what he like puts a knife in him or something like that.
Yeah, like two pieces of fucking glass or something.
Yeah, and then he takes his hands and like sticks them in the dude's like cavity, like fingers in there. And then the guy falls down and like I'm assuming he's already dead. And Bruce is like, you know what? Gets on top of him.
And just fucking UFC mounts him.
Yeah, UFC mounts him and just punching him in his face.
Yeah.
It's like crazy. There's a lot of blood in this movie too. Like it's like that bright movie blood too. And then the girl gets away because another one of the harem girls that the boss has letters her out. She gets the cops. Cops come, arrest Bruce.
Yeah.
Yeah, this movie is like it's I love this movie, but it's weird as fuck. Like
Yeah, like that whole, you know, having that love interest with his cousin. Like that's your cousin, bro.
it's not
Like,
actually his cousin.
oh
That's the
really?
funny thing. No, because like I said, that was the problem. Like when I mentioned before, where they're not actually his brothers. Because what happened is in the Chinese version, they have it as like, his brothers. They refer to them as brothers and sisters, or whatever, right?
Okay.
And so in America, they're like, okay, how do we make this like less weird? Because they thought it was like literally his sister. Like, how about we make it his cousin? It's like they're not even related.
I always thought they were related the whole time I watched this movie.
Yeah, they're not actually related at all. It's just like it
Oh,
was a
shit.
miss. It was like a miss. Like when they were translating it and stuff, they just like,
Yeah.
were like how do we make this less weird? Let's make her not his sister. Let's make her his cousin. It's like,
So he was just living with his friends,
so
I guess, some random people.
yeah, it was like his brothers or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I guess people that his family knew. You know what I mean? I mean
Okay, I get it.
that whole living situation's crazy because they've got like 7, 8 dudes living there.
Like the projects and shit back in my
Yeah,
day.
it's
Shit.
crazy. Yeah, and then this movie in China at that time was the most successful Chinese movie of all time when it came out. Like it fucking blew box office
It was
records.
big. Yeah, it
Yeah,
was an actual hit.
it was real big.
Bruce is
And
proud of it.
it's funny because it actually went through a different director. Like they started with a different guy, but Bruce didn't like him
Yeah.
because the different guy was upset because Bruce didn't know Peking opera. Like what Jackie Chan, Sammo Hung used to do. They like knew all these different like ways to do stuff, and Bruce knew, his fighting style, which
Yeah.
was fast. It wasn't like 3-minute fights; it was like 15-second fights. And so Bruce called up, Raymond Chow was like, "Hey, we got to get rid of this guy." The director called up Raymond Chow and said, "Hey, we got to get rid of Bruce." And so
Politics.
luckily, Raymond Chow took Bruce's side and kicked rid of him and got that Lo Wei to direct it. Lo Wei had trouble with him too, but they produced this movie. And I guess
Must have been.
Tony Chen, the guy who was supposed to be the star, also was
Yeah.
kind of like a little bit bitter about it too.
Must have been dope for Bruce. He dealt with a lot of racism in Hollywood, with the fucking buck teeth and all that shit. Like he didn't like none of that shit. So for him to have his own joint and fucking do as big as it did, must have been a dope feeling for Bruce, man.
Yeah, it's crazy because it's not even like, as we'll get on later in the series, it's like this isn't even like his full work. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
this is like him trying to get in his thing because there's some stuff that he didn't like in the movie. Like if you see that one point when he's fighting those guys, there's that part where he knocks the guy through the wall and it makes like a Looney
The
Tune.
noise. He didn't like the noise. Yeah.
Makes like a Looney Tune shape in the door. Like you can see like his body shape. Bruce didn't like that shit.
Yeah.
And the fighting was a little bit of a mix of both. And so like, later on in his career, like when he got to do Way of the Dragon, that was when he like really got kind of control of what he wanted to do.
Which is so underrated.
Yeah.
I personally love that movie. Yeah.
Yeah. And so this was the first of 2 movies that he made with under his first deal with Golden Harvest, which the next one is Fist of Fury, which is one of my favorites, also called Chinese Connection, which is really fucking good.
Masterpiece.
And this one's really fucking good too.
Yeah, I love it.
The story is really good. This is really where you get to see Bruce kind of like come into his own, before Kato shit. He's actually kind of like a star in this movie, and you can like see it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like every time he's on screen, it's like he's definitely got his star power in this one.
Fuck yeah. Big boss, baby.
Hell yeah, Big Boss.
71.
Also known as Fist of Fury because they mixed up the labeling when they sent it to America. Yeah. Big Boss. Got anything you want to plug, Mike?
Big Club Podcast live every Saturday, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Also catch me on Goons Club Gallery /5 Piece Thursdays, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Fagel Lovers.
Yeah, I'm there as well.
Yeah,
8 p.m. on Fagel Lovers every Thursday. Usually every Thursday. We missed a week, but you know we should be back on schedule now.
Definitely.
Thank you, Mike, for joining me. This is going to be a fun series.
Anytime, brother.
Yeah, hell yeah. All right. See you guys again real soon.